voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Doing nothing is actually doing a lot of something. It's doing a lot of something for Vladimir Putin, and I'm open to the possibility that things are being done that we can't know about. But from kind of an American standing in the world, the American standing in the world today is Donald Trump was told February 27 that the Russians were paying to kill American soldiers, and the public statement is that he will do nothing. How does that land?
Well, I think it's very telling of Donald Trump's failure to live up to the responsibilities of chief executive and commander-in-chief. It's clear from the various reporting that he does not read the PDB. The PDB is called the President's Daily Brief for a reason. It is the intelligence community's best intelligence and analysis that's brought to the person who sits in that Oval Office who's supposed to keep this country safe. And so it sounds as though he was aware of this information somehow, but has not been focused on it. And while he's flirting with Vladimir Putin, continues to, while bounties are being offered, according to this reporting and this intelligence, on the heads of American soldiers, I find it's just reprehensible that he's ignoring that, and he continues to focus on his political interests and what is going to advance his own personal interests, as opposed to protecting not just the interests of the American people, but the lives of American soldiers. And so it's not surprising, and I'm sure it's not surprising to Vladimir Putin, that Donald Trump is not paying attention to these very important matters.
Director Brennan, if I could just push back respectfully, how does it not catch the attention of an American president when there's an object in his PDB that says lethal threats to American soldiers? And if that's true, if that story holds, what does that say about the person who is currently our country's commander-in-chief?
Well, I think it shows that, as many of us have said for quite some time, he is unfit for this high-esteemed office. It's certainly something that would be brought to the attention of any of the presidents I worked for. And I know that the presidents that I worked for would have seized upon this and tried to address it as soon as the information was deemed to be credible and the analysis came forward. I was President Clinton's daily PDB briefer for about a year, and I was in countless PDB sessions with President Bush as well as President Obama. And I know that all three of those presidents would have acted quickly and swiftly upon this. And so, again, I think it just reveals the lack of focus, lack of interest, and the lack of determination on the part of Donald Trump to do what a president needs to do to protect our soldiers who are in harm's way.
Michael, I'm glad that you are here today. I have tried every day to sort of have people like yourself explain that intelligence is the most secret kind of tip sheet in the world. And in the months and weeks and years after 9/11, I went in, the press folks went in after the PDB was briefed to George W. Bush. And so I know what that threat sheet must have looked like. I didn't see it every day, but I know what it must have done to a president who views protecting the country as his most sacred duty. I'm sure President Obama and President Clinton had the same reaction. But can you just explain that, at least in the case of a terror attack, everything is uncorroborated until the terror attack happens? What is that product, the PDB?
Nicole, you're exactly right. And this excuse of it wasn't yet corroborated, so we didn't focus on it. I mean, I used to come in every Tuesday. It was Terrorism Tuesday with President Bush and President Obama. John was there for many of these. And the fact is we did this weekly to a great level of detail. And if we only waited for corroborated or confirmed intelligence that we knew was right, we could have done that about once every 2 or 3 years. And the fact is the flow of intelligence to protect the nation is a constant source of attention for the president, or at least it should be. We start with enormous amount of threats, and something like this, the idea that it would not be briefed early and often, that it would not be discussed, and that options would not be generated and brought to the president about how the U.S. could protect its troops, how it could protect its allies, and what policy steps might be taken, because that's the purpose of the intelligence. The intelligence is there to drive action. And I can guarantee you one thing. One action that wouldn't be recommended to the president after this sort of report is, as Speaker Pelosi said, to actually give Vladimir Putin a benefit and invite him back into the G7. That is just proof positive that in this case, the president didn't spend time on this threat to U.S. troops.
Let me ask you to deepen that explanation a little bit for us, Michael, because it would appear, based on the first New York Times report, that an NSC meeting was convened to do just that. And if you've convened a meeting to talk about this intelligence, maybe a month after it was first in the PDB, doing nothing probably isn't on the list of things you're going to take to the president. You're probably going to break it to him gently that Vladimir Putin is killing American soldiers in Afghanistan. The New York Times has reported that at least 3 are believed to have been killed in connection with this program. We don't know if that is what they were going to take the president, but would doing nothing except trying to squeeze him into the G8 again be on that list?
Doing nothing would not be on that list. Inviting him to the G8 would not be on that list. Calling the reports about this when they come out a hoax would not be on that list. All of those things contribute to, I think, a sense of superiority in Putin's case over the president, an ability to manipulate this president in a way that fundamentally, whether it is meddling in elections or it is targeting U.S. troops, that Putin has the upper hand. And that's really a tragedy for the country.
It is a tragedy to the country, Director Brennan, and to see him use the same smear for a Russian program that, based on the New York Times reporting, may be connected to the deaths of 3 Marines, to use the same smear he used for an investigation run by Robert Mueller into him, to call it a hoax. Where are we? I mean, is that really what he would look into the eyes of those parents and say?
Well, I think we've seen that Donald Trump relies on disinformation, dishonesty, and mischaracterizations of what reality is. And to do it in this instance, when in fact U.S. lives may have been lost as a result of this program being run by the Russians that he ignored, it's just ludicrous that he is not focusing on this. As you pointed out, there was a meeting held at some level of the NSC, maybe at the principal's level, which meant that National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien would have chaired that. It is up to that National Security Advisor to ensure that not just the other heads of departments and agencies are focused on this, but that a president of the United States is. So I'm very curious as to what Robert O'Brien and Donald Trump spoke about, because they really needed to look, as Michael said, at the different options to mitigate the threat. Take action against the Russians. Maybe, tell the Russians that they're going to lose additional diplomats. Work with our allies and partners who also are in Afghanistan and who are fighting next to our troops. Their troops' lives are on the line as well. But again, doing nothing and enhancing the relationship with Russia, that is the exact opposite of what should have been done.
It is Friday, the 3rd of July of 2020. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Yes, the French 77s are virtually available for your virtual imbibing pleasure. It's afternoon somewhere in the world. Somewhere. Just transport yourself there virtually and it will be okay. It will. Okay, well, we're going to need it this weekend. There's going to be a lot of explosive... See what I'm doing there? A lot of explosive turmoil that will be happening over the weekend. Fireworks at Mount Rushmore. I should confess that I have seen fireworks at Mount Rushmore. They blow them up behind the president's heads. Oh, my God. And I never once saw Lincoln flinch. So I guess it would be okay, wouldn't it? All right. Well, the reason they stopped is because even when we were there back in the 60s, there was a grass fire. And apparently grass fires would happen quite frequently on the 4th of July when they did the fireworks. And so they stopped it, let alone what they called pollution in the streams. Why was there pollution in the streams? Not from fireworks smoke and debris falling from the sky. No, it's because of the grass fires and all of the stuff that slid off into the streams. So they stopped that. And Trump says, hey, if I'm going to get a cut on the bounties on U.S. soldiers' heads, what the F do I care about grass fires at Mount Rushmore? Think of the photo op. Backlit, little flickering black backlit light there, you know, from the grass fire. It'll be beautiful. It'll be so beautiful. It'll be good TV. All right. Well, I'm wondering. Is this like a combination of The Apprentice and The Americans? I'm wondering. I'm just wondering. I had a belief when I was a little kid that TV sort of like softened us up for what was to come. Thus, the preponderance of spy shows back in the 60s. I Spy, Man from U.N.C.L.E., even Get Smart. It was all just, normal. Normal. And then all these other things started coming out, and sure enough, next thing we know, oh my God, everything's normal. Bounties on our soldiers' heads? Heck, we did it to the Russians back in the 80s. Did we? All right. So, and even if we did, I think Russia got mad at us about it. Why are we not supposed to be mad about it? Even Glenn Greenwald is out there whining that, this is like the worst propaganda that the John Birch Society ever put out back in there in the Cold War. No, it's not. No one's diving under desks for fear of a nuclear annihilation. Okay, come on. Jeez. The same kind of propaganda that they put out in the Cold War. I am sorry, Glenn. But why don't you just save it for Bolsonaro and leave our politics alone, huh? And F Vlad, too. Why is Greenwald always such an apologist for Vlad? I mean, if there's anybody in a leadership position that needs some oversight, a little bit of investigative journalism, dogged investigative journalism, it would be Vlad. Why doesn't Glenn, save his fire for that? I never have seen an expose on Vlad by Glenn Greenwald. But you got one on Biden. So I don't know. I'm just being rhetorical. I do know Glenn Greenwald was a Republican back in the 90s, just so you know. Kind of conservative one, too. All right, as if that's supposed to be a talisman or a gauge in which someone believes, but it is. So, Trump is now, if he's not saying that the whole thing's a fake, now they're saying it's not corroborated in intel, so he couldn't act on it? What? Come on. He doesn't care about our intel. Our intel is the enemy because our intel knows. And that's why Trump was impeached, because we know. But the maggots are back at it. Apparently, it's just perfectly fine to have bounties on our soldiers' heads. Perfectly fine. Let's just remember something here. The whole Benghazi thing was over this stupid movie called Clinton Cash, or was it a book, that was supposedly not to be able to be distributed right before an election because it was a bunch of propaganda. And they went to court and they whined and they whined and they whined. And then in the midst of it, Benghazi happened, and they glommed onto Benghazi. Now, why did Benghazi happen? Benghazi happened because in their efforts to stick it to the black guy, they decided to defund our embassies and consulates of what? Yes, security. Why would they do that? Did they know something was going to happen? One often wonders, but we're not going to put on those tinfoil hats. All we need to know is that the GOP defunded security for consulates and embassies. And then we were attacked. And 4 of our Americans died, including Ambassador Stevens, who I know somewhat. I knew his mom and dad more than I knew him. Because, you know, when you live in the East Bay, that part of the East Bay, Berkeley, Oakland, you see people down there at the Pete's and by the Claremont, and also down by Cold Coffee, right there on College and Claremont. So there, okay? So 4 Americans died, and they hung this albatross around Hillary's neck because it was her fault. And they made it sound like she planned it. Because they always project and they always blame what they do. Always. So you got to kind of like read between the lines. But not only that, you got to read between those lines too. Yeah, you can parse it down into just like the quantum level. We won't go that far today. So, 4 Americans died. And Lindsey Graham is still having a hearing on that. And maybe 20 or more Americans have died. That's a few Benghazis right there. During a time when Trump was inviting Putin to join the G7 and make it the G8 again. Make the G8 great again. Bring Vlad back. And, you know, taking troops out of Germany, that's what Vlad's been wanting forever and a day. You know, just generally, let's break up NATO. You know, Trump has even come out publicly and said, I don't trust any of our allies. They're the enemy. But Vlad, everything Vlad says, I don't believe my intel, but I believe Vlad. You mean all that Hillary had to do is say that she didn't believe the Repug's intel, but she believes Libya's, so now everybody has to shut up. Yeah, that would have worked. Jeez. So that's how you know that you're living in a cult. Or around a bunch of cultists who wield power. You know, this is worse than the Rajneeshis over there in that Eastern Oregon town where they tried to take it over, and they even went to Portland and tried to poison a state attorney that was looking into their matter. Yeah, they brought in a bunch of Rajneeshis from out of state, met the residency requirements, voted out the local government, and then started taking over. To the point where they were poisoning people at the local Sizzler salad bar because they weren't towing the line the way the Rajneeshis wanted. So it sounds a little bit like that. So, how quickly they turned, which makes you kind of think maybe, you know, Greenwald's bringing up the Cold War. None of those people believed anything that they were talking about. They wanted to do what the Soviets were doing, and now they're doing it with a little bit of Teutonic flavor, which is exactly what Vlad's about to. Yeah, he's going to be calling it the White Army pretty soon, just like Tsarist Russia, just like it. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, that was former CIA director John Brennan. Says Trump is unfit for this high-esteemed office. Well, we knew that the day he took that high-esteemed office and put a knee on his neck. On the rest of the menu, a black operations project manager has filed a racial discrimination complaint against Facebook. And he's not the only one. A federal appellate court blocked the restoration of voting rights to 774,000 people in Florida just in time for the election. And the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff has confirmed service members mobilized in Washington, D.C. were issued bayonets to use against U.S. citizens constitutionally redressing their government. Because, look, Trump doesn't know anything about the Constitution except for what Vlad told him. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the popular protest slogan, "Liberate Hong Kong, Revolution of Our Times," is now illegal under China's new security law. And Malaysia is the first country to suspend Pakistani pilots after a massive license fraud scandal was revealed in Karachi. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, right next to the social media scroll, is our chat room link, and our chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link and the social media scroll is the link to our Patreon page, and thank you for being a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. You know who you are. Thank you for your generosity. And for those of you who are not and would like to be in these times of peril, even though the bulk of how we pay for all of this comes out of our own wallets, we would truly be unable to do it without you. Because as Tom has mentioned, you are our biggest contributor, and we thank you for that. If you could afford the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink sent to us, send those funds to us. And we're able to stretch those dollars because we are very experienced at it. Almost 10 years of experience of stretching dollars so that we can fly under the radar, because when you pay your bills, they sometimes will let you just fly under the radar. And then we can fulfill our civic duty as Resistance Radio, as the founders originally intended, indeed. So thank you for your generosity. And just go to our Patreon link, and it'll walk you through it. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then that gets posted up on social media as one would do. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. Also, hey, if you don't catch the broadcast version of the Justice Department, Musique Sans Frontières, Sunday nights, 8 p.m. on the West Coast, that would be 11 on the East. You can always get it on podcast as well, out of Spreaker, and a few other of those platforms as well. So check that out. It's music, not much talk. But we do a little theme every week, and if you go to the show notes and links diary for the Justice Department Musique Sans Frontières, you'll find the poem in which that theme is derived. And then the music itself becomes what I call a sonic poem that tells that story. Ah, so many layers, so many layers. So check that out. All right, we better get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. and it comes out of the Associated Press by Barbara Ortate. A black Facebook employee, joined by two others who were denied jobs at the social network, has filed a complaint against the company saying it discriminates against black workers and applicants in hiring, evaluations, promotions, and pay. The charge was filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission by Oscar Venezzi Jr., who has worked as an operations program manager at Facebook since 2017 and claims he has not been fairly evaluated or promoted despite his, quote, excellent performance, unquote, at the company. Two others joined Venezzi's complaint, saying they were unlawfully denied jobs at the company despite being qualified. Facebook said in a statement it takes discrimination allegations seriously and investigates every case. And I don't know, maybe they hound those people so much that after the investigation, they just go away. Maybe they just disappear. Maybe they get suspended and muted on Facebook. Maybe. Black workers account for 3.8% of all U.S. Facebook employees and 1.5% of all U.S. technical workers at the company. Those numbers have barely budged over the past several years, a common pattern across Silicon Valley firms. This isn't the first criticism a black employee has leveled at Facebook. Mark Lukey, who left the company in 2018, sent a memo to his coworkers on his last day, also posted on Facebook, that chronicled what he called Facebook's black people problem. Well, you would expect it. Zuckerberg didn't take a humanities class the whole time he was at Harvard before he dropped out to weaponize a rate-a-babe picture site and militarized it to make more money than God. And yes, God has a lot of money. Just read the prosperity gospel. He'll hand it out if you're full of grace. If you are full of grace. Facebook's disenfranchisement of black people on the platform mirrors the marginalization of its black employees, Lukey wrote. In my time at the company, I've heard far too many stories from black employees of a colleague or manager calling them hostile or aggressive for simply sharing their thoughts in a manner not dissimilar from their non-black team members. Why are they always so angry? According to Venezzi's complaint, people of color and black workers in particular remain underrepresented at all levels of Facebook, and especially at the management and leadership levels. They do not feel respected or heard, and they do not believe that black workers have an equal opportunity to advance their careers at Facebook. While there may be Black Lives Matter posters on Facebook walls, the complaint says, black workers don't see that phrase reflecting how they are treated in Facebook's own workplace. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook Speakeasy comes out of the American Independent by way of the Associated Press. A federal appellate court has stayed a lower court ruling that gave impoverished Floridians convicted of felonies the right to vote. And, of course, that was voted on by the electorate, and that won by overwhelming numbers. A vast majority of Floridians said, yeah, if you serve the time, you get to vote. The order disappointed voting rights activists and could have national implications in November's presidential election, do you think? Almost 800,000 people now not being able to vote? Yeah, I would think. In May, a federal judge in Tallahassee ruled that Florida law cannot stop an estimated 774,000 disenfranchised former felons from voting because they can't pay back any legal fees and restitution they owe. The ruling by U.S. District Judge Robert Hinckley called the law a pay-to-vote system, But Repug Governor Ron DeSantis immediately appealed that ruling to the Atlanta-based 11th U.S. Circuit, requesting a stay of Hinckley's ruling and a review of the case by the full appeals court. The appellate court, in a 3-sentence order, granted both requests, and the court gave no timeline on when it would hear the case because the courts are packed with Federalist Society judges packed there by Moscow Mitch McConnell. And that's not just in this reporter's opinion. The district's decision to block Florida's pay-to-vote system followed clear Supreme Court precedent, said Paul Smith, vice president of Campaign Legal Center, which is representing former felons seeking access to the ballot box. And that was under Amendment 4, a voter-approved measure that sought to return voting rights to released felons. We are hopeful that the Court of Appeals will follow suit and confirm once and for all that wealth cannot determine a person's eligibility to vote. The governor's spokeswoman, Helen Ferry, said there would be no comment on the litigation until it is settled. Under Amendment 4, felons who have completed their sentence would have voting rights restored, but the legal dispute arose after state lawmakers, you mean Republicans, moved to define what it means to complete a sentence. You know, even though you've been discharged from prison, you have to wear a scarlet letter for the rest of your life. Just go try getting a job. If they're going to make it hard for a felon to get a job, why should we make it easy for him to vote? Anyway, we got beds to fill in those for-profit prisons. If we don't have high recidivism, how are we going to make a profit? Amendment 4 permanently bars convicted murderers and rapists from voting regardless of financial debts. The stay, if it extends into the fall, could influence the election outcome in November. Really? Isn't that what voter suppression is all about? Florida is considered a must-win state in Trump's bid for re-election, and Florida's disenfranchised felons represent a significant bloc and a state well known for razor-thin election margins, and many of those felons are black and presumably Democrats. Hinckley's ruling said state elections officials were ill-prepared to review the hundreds of thousands of voter registration applications that could arrive ahead of the state's August primary and the November presidential vote. Sarah Blake Morgan and James Laporta of the AP bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has confirmed a report by the Associated Press that some of the service members who were mobilized to D.C. last month in response to civil unrest over the killing of George Floyd were issued bayonets. You know, the kind that you run through. When I say run through, you put the whole bayonet through someone's body. Then you use your foot to push them off because they're stuck on it. They're going to use that against American citizens. Isn't that fun? Defense documents obtained by the AP show some were not trained in riot response. Members of the Army's 82nd Airborne from Fort Bragg in North Carolina and the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, which is based in D.C. and typically guards the tomb of the unknown soldier, were mobilized last month to respond to massive protests over the treatment of black Americans and systemic issues of police brutality, but the troops were never actually sent to the protests after they arrived. But I like the idea. Here's some bayonets. Use them on your neighbors. Yeah, they're not people. We're going to change the hearts and minds of our troops to turn around and say, we're not protecting America from foreign interference. Nah, we got some enemies within. And they're in the streets of D.C. right now. They are a hate group using bayonets on American citizens. The idea, the fantasy of it is so appalling. Do we wait until November? Let's put it this way. If we're going to get the guy out in November, we better really ramp up our game. And we need to get more people registered to vote, especially when they're taking over 500,000 out of the rolls at a pop. Roughly 700 members of the 82nd Airborne Division were sent on that day to 2 military bases near the district capital area. The AP previously reported soldiers were armed with live rounds, bayonets, and riot gear. Bloomberg reported on June 11th that the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, nicknamed the Old Guard, were also issued bayonets. Upon arrival, neither the 82nd nor the Old Guard were ever called off base and into the city to respond to protests. Division paratroopers were sent back to Fort Bragg on June 4th, but the reports led to a sharp condemnation and outrage on social media platforms. An unclassified military document obtained by the AP also shows that some of the soldiers were not prepared to deal with the protesters. Instead, commanders planned to give them the proper training within 96 hours of their arrival in Washington. In other words, you can learn how to kill U.S. citizens while on the job. All right, that takes us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, living life to the fullest. Movies about dying young are nothing new, nor movies about drug addiction. However, few movies have ever successfully combined the two to create a surprisingly upbeat dramedy the way that Sharon Murphy has in her tender coming-of-age picture Baby Teeth. This Australian import, featuring the always wonderful Ben Mendelsohn, tells the story of Mila, a teenager battling cancer who happens to fall in love with an older, drug-dealing boy named Moses. To say Moses has issues is an understatement. However, Mila's seemingly normal middle-class family isn't without problems either. The aforementioned Mendelsohn plays Mila's father, Henry, who is overly dependent on medication and denial to address the serious cracks in his marriage, as well as the fact that his daughter may not be long for this world. Understandably, Henry and his wife Anna are upset by their daughter's choice of a boyfriend, but nonetheless they allow the relationship to continue because they don't want to deny Mila's wishes given all she's been through. As it turns out, though, Moses isn't the disaster that they and the audience thought he would be, and he actually teaches all of them important lessons about forgiveness and living life to the fullest, even with unfavorable odds. Baby Teeth is one of those rare films about death that avoids hospital scenes and medical jargon. The cast is excellent, with Eliza Scanlon standing out in her role as Mila. Scanlon was best known previously for playing the Amy Adams character's little sister in HBO's Sharp Objects. She has an amazingly expressive face and is totally believable as a normal teen who just happens to have a terminal illness. Creatively shot and well scripted, Baby Teeth is a quiet, understated gem of a movie you should seek out and watch. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60 Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. The image of a dorsal fin cutting through the sea surface is iconic. But scientists studying the stomach contents of young great white sharks off the coast of Australia were in for a surprise when they learned that the predators seemed to spend a lot of time patrolling the sea floor.
They have a predominantly fish-based diet, which is not unexpected for juvenile white sharks. The most important prey species we identified was Eastern Australian salmon.
University of Sydney graduate student Richard Granger. He and his team sorted through the stomach contents of more than 50 juvenile white sharks that died after being entangled in shark exclusion nets meant to protect swimmers.
The overall unexpected finding was just the diversity and importance of bottom-dwelling species, things like stargazers, which bury themselves in the sand. They're quite strange-looking fish, and flathead, but also stingrays.
People actually did not have a good idea of the particulars of great white shark diets. As Granger points out, the sharks enjoy protections throughout the world, so most researchers estimated their diets through the chemical markers that they can ethically access by taking small skin samples. These measurements indicate at what level of the food chain the predator is feeding, but not the actual critters that make up their meals.
There's quite a lot of evidence that lots of different animals, so even carnivores, omnivores, herbivores, they'll select different prey or food based on a particular balance of nutrients.
Granger hopes that by further understanding what juvenile white sharks like to eat, he can begin to piece together how and why they make their predatory choices. The study was published in the journal Frontiers in Marine Science.
Understanding and predicting when sharks might be more abundant in certain areas would be an ultimate end goal.
Avoiding or mitigating human-shark conflicts means understanding the shark's nutritional goals. And if researchers can anticipate where and when sharks are likely to spend their time hunting, they can better protect humans from getting bitten and sharks from getting killed. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1835. That was the day that textile workers walked off the job at 20 mills in Paterson, New Jersey. But this was not a strike like we might picture one today, with burly men walking the picket line or women chanting as they carry picket signs. In Paterson, most of the strikers were children, ages 10 to 18. Many were young girls. Child labor was in high demand in the silk mills because of their small, nimble fingers. The children walked off the job because they wanted an 11-hour workday and a 6-day work week. They were tired of working 13 grueling hours a day, 7 days a week. Soon, their parents formed the Paterson Association for the Protection of the Working Class to support the strikers. There were no labor unions in Paterson back then. The company refused to negotiate. Women textile workers at other mills in the area also walked off the job. At its peak, 2,000 workers had walked out on strike. Finally, after 6 long weeks, the company agreed to a compromise. They settled on 5 12-hour days and 9 hours on Saturday. The children went back to work to a 69-hour work week. Strike leaders were blacklisted from the mills. This would not be the last time that child laborers took a stand on the job. In 1912, children workers were an important part of the famous Bread and Roses strike of Lawrence, Massachusetts textile workers. In 1933, children workers in Allentown, Pennsylvania sweatshops joined in a strike. Their participation led the governor's wife to join them on the picket line. The strikers there won an increase in wages and reduced hours. Children fought against their exploitation by taking to the picket lines. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The United States confirmed over 55,000 new coronavirus cases on Thursday, hitting another single-day record. More than 10,000 of those cases were in Florida, where Governor Ron DeSantis is in denial and is reluctant to take any definitive measures. In Texas, though, Governor Greg Abbott, who just a few weeks ago prohibited mayors throughout the state from making mandatory mask orders, has changed course, now issuing a statewide order requiring people in counties with more than 20 diagnosed cases to wear face coverings inside businesses or other buildings open to the public, or in outdoor public space where social distancing is impossible. COVID cases are now on the rise in 40 states. Many of them have now rolled back reopening plans. Well, Donald Trump begins his 3-day Independence Day weekend at Mount Rushmore, where 7,500 people are expected to attend a fireworks display on Friday night. Republican Governor Kristi Noem, a Trump ally, said masks will be optional and social distancing won't be required at the event. That prompted objections from local officials, including the Republican mayor of nearby Rapid City. Leaders of several Native American tribes in the region also warned the event could result in a coronavirus spike among their members. You think? Harold Frazier, chairman of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, said, "The president is putting our tribal members at risk to stage a photo op at one of our most sacred sites." Authorities are watching trends around Tulsa, Oklahoma, following Trump's June 20th rally there. And there are some troubling signs. For instance, former Republican presidential candidate Herman Cain is in the hospital. Cain learned Monday that he had tested positive for COVID-19 and was admitted on Wednesday. Yes, he attended Trump's rally in Tulsa. Now, the Trump campaign announced hours before the event that 6 staff members on the advance team had tested positive for the coronavirus. And after the rally, 2 members of the Secret Service who attended also tested positive. Cain said in a video on his website that he had worn a mask at the event when in groups of people, but he posted photos on social media showing him without a mask, surrounded by a lot of other unmasked people. The Supreme Court on Thursday agreed to hear the Trump administration's appeal of a lower court ruling that said Congress should have access to secret grand jury materials from then special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. So, the Supreme Court will take up the case in its next term that starts in October, which means that Democrats won't get to see the secret grand jury testimony before the November presidential election. An appeals court previously sided with Democrats and said that lawmakers should be given access to the materials because Mueller's probe stopped short of coming to a conclusion about whether the president tried to obstruct justice. The DOJ says the House hasn't indicated that it, quote, urgently needs these materials for any ongoing impeachment investigation. Maybe it's time to start a new one. As for the remaining 8 Supreme Court decisions still to be announced, the court said they would begin releasing the next batch Monday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. The U.S. Senate unanimously approved a final version of the Hong Kong Autonomy Act, a bill that would punish China for moves that lawmakers fear will crush democratic freedoms in Hong Kong. The legislation would impose sanctions on businesses and individuals that help China restrict freedom in the autonomous city. Beijing put its new national security law into effect in Hong Kong this week, and it's already resulted in arrests and widespread unrest. Well, you know the old adage, money talks? Well, as monuments to Confederate traitors continue to fall and the outrage over such tributes are being reconsidered, new pressure from investors has prompted FedEx to ask the Washington NFL franchise, still inexplicably known as the Redskins, to change its name. FedEx paid $205 million for the naming rights to Washington Stadium in 1999, so the team plays on FedEx Field. Adweek reported Wednesday that a group of 87 investment firms had written 3 letters to Nike, FedEx, and PepsiCo, asking the companies to sever their business ties with the Washington team unless they dropped the current moniker. By the way, Frederick Smith is the founder of FedEx and the company's CEO, and he's also a member of the team's ownership group. Yes, money talks. And finally, the FBI on Thursday arrested Ghislaine Maxwell, longtime confidant of sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, on allegations that she helped her then-boyfriend recruit underage girls who were subjected to sexual abuse. A grand jury indictment unsealed Thursday charges Maxwell on 6 counts, including enticement and conspiracy to entice minors to travel to engage in illegal sex acts, transportation and conspiracy to transport minors with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, and 2 counts of perjury. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit, looking to have nearly the same temperature as yesterday in the mid-80s. Abundant sunshine with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Generally clear tonight with lows in the mid-50s, winds remaining out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tomorrow, on Independence Day, you better stay inside. You better. We're going to be mainly sunny with highs in the mid-80s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases in Jackson County of Southern Oregon have jumped, spiked. We were at 114 yesterday. We have 131 today. And we're not even, and I just got to say, we're not even testing at the levels we're supposed to. We are, in this state, for some reason, have actually reduced testing. And yet we're spiking almost 15 in one day in this tiny county. When I say tiny, it's actually a huge county, but it encompasses a lot of, well, unpopulated areas. There's still no numbers on deceased because for some reason in this county they will not track that. Why this county? Well, you know, this is the county that bought into the Russian secession movement. Funded by the Russians, by the way. And I'm not lying. Grass pollen right outside the window of the mothership here is high. The air quality index in the Southern Oregon Rogue River Valley region is good at 36 parts per million, and that daytime UV index remains very high at 9. Get out the SP50 and put it on! Put it on! Barometric pressure is rising at 30.04 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 83%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Hey, the P-tape actually exists. Pop those P's? It's all right. You got a spit screen. What is that? Look it up. London is 68 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 73 and sunny. Wow. Rome is 89 and sunny with a heat advisory that could shut down critical infrastructure during a pandemic. Kyiv is 90 degrees and fair. Kabul is 81 and fair. Hong Kong is 79 and mostly cloudy with a forecast of cracked heads because of the new security law. Tokyo is 70 degrees with rain and a flood advisory. Sydney, Australia is 52 and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees, mostly cloudy with a fog advisory because that happens this time of year. And New York is crispy 84 degrees Fahrenheit, partly cloudy. Has the humidity come in yet? Maybe it's sticky. Well, that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Jesse Pang and Anne-Marie Rowntree of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A man carrying a Liberate Hong Kong sign as he drove a motorcycle into police at a protest against the territory's Chinese rulers became today the first person charged with inciting separatism and terrorism under a new security law. Beijing imposed the legislation on the former British colony earlier this week, despite protests from Hong Kongers and Western nations, setting China's freest city and a major financial hub on a more authoritarian track. Critics say the law, which punishes crimes of secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces, with up to life in prison, and it is aimed at crushing dissent and a long-running campaign for greater democracy.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Liz Lee of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Malaysia's Aviation Regulator has suspended pilots employed by domestic airlines who hold Pakistani licenses after the government of the South Asian nation revealed that many pilots had dubious qualifications. The Civil Aviation Authority of Malaysia said in a statement that the decision came after an evaluation of all foreign pilots in Malaysia. The regulator told Reuters that there are less than 20 Pakistani pilots in the country. National carrier Malaysia Airlines said it does not have any Pakistani pilots. Malindo Air, the Malaysian arm of Indonesia's Lion Air, said it does not have any foreign pilots, and Air Asia says it does not have any Pakistani pilots. The Civilian Aviation Authority of Malaysia said the pilots were employed with local operators such as flying schools, flying clubs, and training organizations. Pakistan last week grounded almost a third of its pilots after discovering they may have falsified their qualifications. Pakistan has a total of 860 pilots, 107 of whom work for foreign airlines. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, and you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on through the holiday because that's what we do. And we'll meet up on Monday for River City Hash Monday. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.